Nice backdrop. Where are you calling from right now?
I'm in my studio in Chicago.
Beautiful. So you're still living in Chicago now, but some of the other band members live in other parts of the country?
Joe and I are from here in Chicago, but our
Mhm.
drummer Brandon has always been from Denver, and so he moved back there eventually. And then our guitar player Zach lives in Austin, and he joined the band later, and so we never moved here because he didn't really need to. We were just traveling all the time.
And how have things been through the pandemic? And especially now that we know that the worst seems to be in the rear view.
Yeah, I didn't get to see my guys a lot because obviously we were spread out.
Yeah.
But we just started seeing each other more with like rehearsing. We had some events last week for our album release in Chicago. We did a record signing at a record store here in Chicago. We just filmed a thing at a venue yesterday. So it's starting to feel more normal, to do what I do, to see my guys, my crew. It's good to kind of like reconnect with like this new appreciation for what we all do, what we all love to do.
Yeah, I guess in the last year, we've all had a lot of time to reflect on everything that we took for granted.
Yeah, that was true for me as well. Like I'm not really like I never been like a really nostalgic or kind of look back kind of guy. I've always sort of just looked forward. But I feel like this year kind of to kind of look back a little bit and be really grateful for what we've done as a band, in the last 20 years, especially as we were living through a time where we weren't sure if we were ever going to be able to do it again. And so
Mm.
there's a lot of gratitude there.
Yeah, I guess there was a thought while we were in the middle of all this of what it would look like when we come out on the other side. And I think there was a real fear that it would be very, very different. And I'm getting the sense now that, yeah, there might be a kind of new normal, but things will be normal again. We can settle in.
Yeah, I was listening to the same things, just like, are we going to, like, in terms of my world, is a show going to be like 20% capacity for the next year? Or is it going to,
Mm.
or is it going to be 100%? Like, are we going to wear masks? Are we going to have to get tested everywhere we go? What will live music look like if and when it comes back? And everybody had a different vision of what that would be. And so far, like, it's looking like things are coming back in a very normal way. And so like there will be, I'm sure there'll be some differences here and there, but it's exciting to see that we might be able to kind of bring this thing back to where we were and enjoy it the same way we always did.
It's interesting, something you just said there when you said that you wondered if things might be 20% capacity from now on once we come out of this. And it just occurred to me that if it was that way, something like that isn't sustainable.
There's that too. Yeah, like we can't pay for the trucks and the bus and the crew playing for a fifth of what we normally play for. The venues can't keep the lights on, at a big place like that if it's only 20% like that. Yeah, you're right. There would be a lot of repercussions.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, congratulations on the new album, No Regeneration. It came out last week. And being from Chicago, when you were a punk band playing bowling alleys, never in a million years could you have imagined having a Rise Against Day declared in the Windy City. What a trip.
Yeah, absolutely. The things that we did as a punk and hardcore band in the 90s were very much underground. They were far, far away from the establishment. They were anti-establishment. And so to have something as big as like the gears of the third biggest city in America recognize what you do, especially coming from a city where there are so many amazing artists and athletes and actors and people that come from the city, to think that somebody's recognized us as a name on that list, like that's pretty huge, that's for sure.
So at the beginning, you were outliers. Now you're a little more mainstream. Who came around?
Well, I would like to think that they came around.
Yeah. The world revolves around you, Tim.
Right? That's what everybody tells me. Yeah, I was like, I think that we sort of did what we did until people couldn't ignore it anymore. You know what I mean? And it's a good way to get to where we are, because you do things on your own terms, and like you don't exist like as somebody else's whim, and then it becomes the thing that people respect you for, which is like feels pretty good.
Yeah, people get that eventually. If it takes them a little while, they get it, and I think that scores more points in the long run. It may be a harder road to trawl, but it works better, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Like I think that there was never any false advertising with Rise Against. It was like what you see is what you get. You know what I mean? If you're looking for someone who's going to listen a little more, like then we might not be your band. You know, we're the band's
Yeah,
gonna.
yeah, and you know what? Nowadays, the so-called bullshit meter. I mean, it's more sensitive than it's ever been, right?
That yeah, that's true. I've used that with our band. Like we all have a good bullshit detector, and our fans are great bullshit detectors. You know what I mean? So it's like that they know. You know what I mean? They know, they see through everything. You know what I mean? So it's like just be honest and authentic to who you are, and hopefully you'll have a community of fans that recognize that and identify with what you're creating.
Authenticity rules.
Yeah, I think so. It's like that's the advice that I give um younger bands, because that's you don't want to get stuck down some road where you can't be yourself, or
Mhm.
to exist you have to do something that you're uncomfortable with.
The themes on the new album, in lockstep with your work from the past. I guess a word I would use to describe your lyrical content is empathy. And I was wondering if you were brought up in that kind of household, or are you just wired that way?
Mm. Yeah, I would say it's something. It probably has something to do with the household I was brought up in. But I also, I mean, like a band and music to me should be like a mirror to society and your listeners. You know, it should like be talking, singing, and writing about the way people feel and putting it in a way that maybe helps them understand it. And music has always done that for us. Like music distills a moment and a feeling and says something in a way that few other things can say or and do, and it translates in this different way. It hits us, you know what I mean? It hits us in a different way. And that's when music is at its best, when it can really connect with somebody when they say, you know what, I didn't know what I was feeling, but that put it into words. Or I didn't know, you know, about this sadness or this happiness, but this song speaks to it. And like that, you can't do that without listening. You know what I mean? Without listening to people. And especially on this album, Nowhere Generation, it really, this album was me lending an ear to our community of fans around the world about their fears and anxieties about what tomorrow is going to look like for them.
Hmm. And it's interesting. Um, you talk to a younger generation and speak to the challenges that lie ahead for them. And as valid as that is, has anything changed? I mean, as much as things have changed, they're still the same.
What gives me a lot of hope is talking to young people who don't agonize over some of the issues that the older generation still agonizes over. You know, older generations still agonize over gay rights and gay marriage. The younger generation does not. The older generation still agonize over issues about environmentalism. They're still questioning a lot of the science. Younger generations are not questioning that science. Those issues are in the wake. And those are the things that give me hope that when this younger generation finally has their hands on the steering wheel, we're going to be in some pretty good hands.
You have two daughters.
Yeah,
How do they reflect on your work?
they don't. I
Interesting.
have teenagers, so like they're in their own world. What dad does is, kind of just like what dad does. So every once in a while, I can get them to engage with it, but for the most part, they are, they're their own people with their own music and their own like art that they're engaged in. It doesn't have a lot to do with my art.
Yeah, I was maybe I should have reframed the question or said it a little bit differently. I was kind of trying to ask how they shape their work, how they shape your work.
I have teenage daughters, so like I'm no longer like at the beginning of the road of parenting with like
Hmm.
baby. I'm towards the end of the road of parenting with like the the nest that they live in, like they're soon going to leave, you know? And so that's like a shift I think every parent goes through, like thinking about like I'm no longer looking at the entrance, I'm looking at, like they're going to be going and finding themselves pretty soon. And so that's made me think differently about the world in which they will be released into, you know? And that kind of informed this record a little bit because, you know, if you're someone who had a good experience growing up, you try to make sure that your children have a good experience growing up like you did. And if you had a bad experience, then you try to make sure your kids avoid those pitfalls, you know? And so I want to help them, but I also recognize that like I grew up in a different time. I grew up in a very stable time politically, economically, and socially. You know what I mean? They are growing up in a very a time of instability. They're growing up. Their experiences are going to be different. My advice is only going to hold so much water. There's new rules. There's a new playbook to play by. And in some ways, they know more about it than I do.
Through all of this, you can't believe how fast it's gone with them and how far you've come since then, right?
Since that you're a parent too.
Yeah, yeah, I sure am.
Everybody, the most cliche thing to say is that it goes fast, right? But I say it every day, and that's what I tell my friends that are just having kids, man. It's like they say it, everyone's going to say it goes fast, and you're not going to listen, and you're just going to be thinking about getting through the sleepless nights. So like one
Yeah,
day, those
yeah.
nights,
You don't know it until you experience it. And I'm getting the wrap up sign here. So I wish we had more time. Maybe when you're in Toronto, you can take a trip out here, or we can take a trip down there and get a little deeper. This has been a real pleasure, Tim. Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you. Thanks for the interview, and thanks to everybody supporting No War Generation.